What's up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Processing Blue, where, Mike, what do we do?
We process blue for you.
That's right. He's Mike Kaye. I'm Alex Zietlow, and we are Carolina Panthers beat writers for the Charlotte Observer. We have a great show for you today. We'll rehash that strange loss the Panthers took to the Saints this past weekend. We'll then ask the question, where do the Panthers go from here? And then we'll give our predictions ahead of this monumental Bucs game. But Mike, first, I got to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, I know that you and myself and Scott Fowler all chose the Panthers to win this game. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised were you with Sunday's result?
Not super surprised, but I was surprised. I really thought, especially in that first half, it looked like they played up to the moment.
Mm.
And then it just felt like, as JC Horn said Monday, whatever could have gone wrong went wrong. And so, listen, this is a team that is young. They're figuring stuff out. They're going to make mistakes. But I saw a lot of veterans make mistakes. JC Horn, Derek Brown, A'Shawn Robinson, Ike Ekwonu. This wasn't just like a learning moment for them. I just don't think this team knows how to be a good team at the moment. And Luke Kuechly said something to that effect in an interview with JJ Jansen on his SiriusXM show the other day. I caught wind of that before the Saints game, and I caught wind of that. I saw that on social media yesterday, which I thought, he really predicted the future there. Good teams typically can keep it up week to week, and they can beat teams that are playing above their talent level, which is what the Saints are doing. The Saints are not playing like a 4-10 team. They're playing like a middling team, pretty comparable to the Panthers. And I don't know what it is about that building, but the last head coach to win in New Orleans was Steve Wilkes with the Panthers. And so, I mean, I wasn't surprised in that they've really struggled in New Orleans. New Orleans is a loud place to play. That dome, for some reason, has like an adverse effect on them that the Mercedes-Benz Stadium does not, despite also being a dome. And, I thought Bryce Young played a fine game. I thought the play calling really didn't heighten once it was very clear that the penalties and the points were catching up to Dave Canales. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I want to toss this back to you and say, Alex, how surprised were you by this game? Because you expected this, I believe, to be a blowout, right?
I expected it to be 10 points. And that was honestly me being pretty conservative in my expectation. But let's be clear. Listeners of the Processing Blue podcast and who read CharlotteObserver.com, particularly on those Sunday predictions, know to just stay away from what Alex thinks when it comes to game-by-game results. I am the closest of every predictor on the season total because I thought the Panthers could get 8 wins this year.
Well, no, technically you're not. I had 7, so if they lose out, I'm correct.
I mean, I guess. You really think they're going to lose out the last 3 games of the season, though?
I don't, but...
I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but why not? Let's just jump into it.
Well, no, I mean, I think their ceiling is probably 8 wins. Scott and I talked about it last week, and I'm not trying to be negative. I think this team has overachieved in a lot of ways. They've also underachieved against the Saints. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's hard to figure out what this team is week to week because you want to buy what they're selling one week to the next. The problem is, I think everything's starting to kind of even out, and they are what they are. Do I think they can beat the Buccaneers once? Yeah, I don't think they can beat the Buccaneers twice. As bad as the Buccaneers have been, this team just historically has not played them well over the last several years. And we saw that, that historical trend mattered against New Orleans this season. So, and as people turn off this podcast, because we've already gotten to the litany of woe, I think this is a team that, even if they win 7 or 8 games, is not a failure. I think they've made progress. That said, house money comes with expectations, as I wrote in the Access Panthers newsletter. Free newsletter to sign up for on any of our articles. Make sure you do. It comes out Mondays and Saturdays. You get some insight that you wouldn't get on the website from Alex Zietlow and myself. But as I rant, I think fans see that they can touch a division title for the first time in 10 years. They can potentially make the playoffs for the first time in 7 years, or in 8 years. And when you see that glimmer of hope, you want to touch it. And it becomes unquenchable the way that you desire to get it, to say, hey, we're better than the Buccaneers who have won 4 straight division titles. You can finally slay the dragon. And before the season, you and I both thought they would come up short to Tampa. While I think they've played better than either one of us expected, I also think they have shown that they are what we kind of thought they were, from the standpoint of, this is a team that's going to have growing pains. It's a team that's going to slinky around this season. And while having expectations was not a big thing coming into the year, how you play is how people gravitate towards your expectations. And I think they raised the bar, which is a good thing, but that also leaves a sense of unfulfillment if you can't close.
Absolutely. We're going to get to, I changed my mind again. We're going to go back to our planned itinerary. We will get to explaining all the playoff scenarios that the Panthers can kind of navigate, and a little bit later on in the show. But first things first, let's recap the Saints game, because I think this game in many ways was the final puzzle piece to this strangely, sometimes delightful, sometimes infuriating season that these Panthers are having. Because the one thing the Panthers have kind of avoided doing, I mean, yes, I know that they lost close to Arizona week 2 of the season, but even that was like closer than it should have been, because they received an onside kick and all these things. It wasn't like a close game throughout. This was the first time the Panthers lost a close game throughout. And all their other close games that was competitive throughout, the Panthers found a way to eke out a win. That's why you keep seeing these stats of Bryce Young notched another game-winning drive and stuff like this. Like that, it's because the Panthers just didn't really lose close games, and now they finally have. And so now everything is full circle when it comes to this like chaotic season the Panthers are going through. So let's identify some of the reasons in which how they lost this game to the Saints. Panthers lose 20-17 on a game-winning field goal by the leg of Charlie Smith. A lot of issues in this game. Panthers notched 11 penalties for 103 yards. 11 was tied for the second most in the league in Week 15. The Commanders also had 11 penalties, and the Falcons somehow had 19 penalties. I don't know how that was freaking possible, but that happened. And then the penalty ultimately came down. It ultimately affected the last play of the game. The Saints were in position to kick a 62-yard field goal or so. Lathan Ransom lowers his head and makes head-to-head contact with Tyler Shuck. That's increases it by 15 yards, or it causes an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or unnecessary roughness penalty 15 yards down the field, sets up a 47-yarder that ultimately sails true. Mike, where do you want to start in this game? Is it the penalties? Is it Bryce Young's play, who actually had a pretty efficient game but just couldn't kind of come up when it mattered most? Do you want to talk about the defense kind of being disjointed, particularly in the secondary in the fourth quarter? Where do you want to start this game?
Well, what I think is interesting is Dave Canales seems to typically be a reactionary play caller, and I don't think he reacted well to the adversity of having all these penalties, to the defense giving up really quick drives. I thought he called conservative plays after they went up 17-7 in a way where it was like they were up by 20 points. That wasn't the case. And I think when the Olave drive happened, where he and Shuck connected for 4 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown, and it was super fast, he didn't have answers to when the Saints were knocking on the door. And I think defensively, they were conservative throughout the second half as well, and that bit them as well. So I think from a coaching standpoint, it felt like they didn't adjust once it was very clear the Saints had all the momentum. But also on the players for executing, I thought the penalties, some of the penalties were utterly ridiculous. And they knew coming into this that this referee group called a lot of penalties. The Derek Brown late hit, I think is hard for him to control. The Lathan Ransom hit was 100% a legitimate penalty. Whether Shuck sold it or not, it was going to be a penalty. I think it's hard to do that. I mean, as JJ Jansen put out on Twitter, he thinks they should eliminate the slide. I think it's very tough for linebackers and safeties who have a rev up in space to stop when a guy slides in traffic. And so QBs are going to weaponize that. And frankly, it's smart. I mean, I don't know if they're willing to balance that with potentially being in the concussion protocol for 2 weeks. But, I mean, it's a real legitimate problem. But based on the rules, that was a legitimate penalty to call. And they will call that almost every time. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a mixture of the penalties, the defense not adjusting well to those penalties, and the offense really not adjusting to anything that was really going on in the game. They started off hot, and they scored on the opening drive. Bryce Young had some pretty impressive throws. The Jalen Coker throw was definitely in his top 10 of throws as a professional. I thought Dave going for it on 4th and 1 was fine. I didn't love the play call of handing the ball off. Going backwards to go forward is never really the best move. Then again, I would have been annoyed if he ran at a shotgun too. So they just don't have that QB sneak answer. And as Dave said, you know, you don't want to run your 204 pound. Well, he's listed as 204 pounds, but Dave said that he's about 190 pounds, and you don't want to put him in a pile. There's some people that push back that say that QB sneaks are all about the offensive line. That's not true. There are people that say, you know, the quarterback needs to be bigger or it's less of an injury risk than you think. Not true either. But, like, so what I would say is, like, Dave's logic is sound about not doing sneaks with Bryce Young. The problem is it's been 2 years and you don't have a sneak package at all. So, like, as I wrote on Tuesday, Mitchell Evans took snaps under center in college. He was a quarterback in high school. They ran about 11 short yardage plays with him at Notre Dame. He handled it well. He's been here all year. Why haven't you figured this out? And I think that's a legitimate criticism of Canales and Brad Idzik in that you get, like, they're pretty good on 4th down. Like, they have a 70% success rate. They're not that great on 3rd down though. So having a short yardage play that you know that you can go to in that situation would help them exponentially, I think, and would help them progress. You can't just throw shot plays every 4th down. You can't just run the ball with the running backs because while Chuba is typically good with short yardage plays, he was the runner to use on that play. It's not, the offensive line isn't always going to get that push that you need. And so to be so reliant on that, especially when you're going back to go forward, the momentum there just kind of doesn't help you. And so I think they really need to figure out their short yardage offense, whether it's in this year or heading into next year, if you're not going to use Bryce Young as a QB sneak guy. I know I'm rambling a bit, but like it was a very problematic game in all.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up the 4th down stuff, and particularly the Mitchell Evans, his history of being able to push the line forward and score. I'm pretty sure his first collegiate touchdown was from under center, right?
That's what he told me. So
gotcha. Yeah, no, well, yeah, that's what I read this morning, and so I was from you, obviously, and so I was like, oh wow, this is a real possibility. Now, I do understand what Dave Canales said on the second half of his answer to you when he said, well, we've also found a lot of success going deep on fourth down. The Panthers don't upset the Rams without those 2 deep touchdowns on fourth down, one to Jalen Coker, one to Teteroa McMillan. I understand that. But for the football purists, that I also understand where if you look at a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who don't even mess around, if it's 3rd and 1, they're going to do the tush push. And they've had a lot of success sustaining drives that way too. I understand all of it. Did you get through what you wanted to get through when it comes to the play calling and really just about this Saints game as a whole? I mean, I agree with you too. A lot of those penalties were deserved for the most part. I think that because the Saints got penalized a lot too. It wasn't a one-sided kind of sort of deal.
Sure. They are not.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, man. I think the secondary did those last 2 drives were really difficult. You're starting on the 9-yard line. The Saints are starting on the 9-yard line and have 57 seconds left to get into reasonable field goal range. Not sure how you give up chunk plays of 15 yards, 19 yards. I think another like a 9-yard pass, and then a penalty, an unnecessary roughness penalty that gets them into field goal range. I'm not sure exactly how that happens. But we can have this discussion about is prevent defense actually effective all day long. Every single defensive coordinator in the NFL does it. So clearly it is the right thing to do.
Well, I think they went to it too early.
Okay.
That would be my 10 points in the NFL now, as we've seen, is not a runaway sort of win, especially when it's established in the early third quarter. And I just kind of thought the Saints took what the defense gave them, and it helped them move pretty quickly. J.C. Horn basically said that they ran pretty much the same play over and over again and were able to pick up yardage on that Olave drive. So I feel like this. Well, I don't think Evero is very reactionary. I think Dave Canales is. And I was a little surprised that he didn't react to the way the game is going and the feel of the game. And that's something we've talked about with balancing play calling and game management. He speaks with George Lee up in the booth. He speaks to Brad Isaac on the sideline. I just think, like, from a matter of fluidity of function, essentially, it is really hard to do that, especially when you're still kind of filling yourself out as an offensive play caller and as a head coach. So he's balancing both of those things. Plus he's working with the quarterbacks. Plus he's doing, you know what I mean? It's a lot for somebody. That's not even a criticism. It's just a lot. And, there's no easy button for him or really for Bryce and with this offense. And I think that's something they really need to look at from an infrastructure standpoint. I'm not saying either one of them needs to go. I'm saying they need to kind of figure out how to make this thing go, so to speak. And whether that means having a legitimate offensive coordinator calling plays, whether that means adding a passing game coordinator who has play calling experience, who can aid in this, whole thing that Brad and Dave are trying to create, whether that's, making some changes to position coaching with somebody who has more experience. Like, they need to figure out the infrastructure of this offense because it's slinkied so much. And maybe it'll get better with time, as a lot of things with this team have. But I just think staying static is not the answer here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's still 3 games left. Maybe they'll prove us wrong. They've done it pretty often of late.
As Mike Jackson said yesterday, this is life in the NFL. If we win this game, we're not even talking about secondary issues. We're not even talking about blah, blah, blah. So that is all true. All right. So we are now going to employ our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis, who made some awesome full screen graphics that explain the playoff scenarios ahead of these Panthers. Zach, can you put those up real quick? Okay, perfect. The Panthers, and Mike, let's get into this. The Panthers can make the playoffs if, one, they sweep the Bucs. They play the Bucs this coming week in week 16 and then week 18 as well. And they can also and or they can make the playoffs if they beat the Bucs once, then beat the Seahawks in week 17, and the Dolphins beat the Bucs in week 17. So a little bit more complicated than if the Panthers would have just won on Sunday against the Saints. But here we are. The Panthers still technically control their own destiny. Next slide, please. Now, the Bucs can make the playoffs if they win any of their final 3 games. So one win against the Panthers would be fine. Sweeping the Panthers would be fine. And then the Bucs, in order to do that, they play the Panthers in week 16, the Dolphins week 17, and the Panthers week 18. So both teams technically control their own destiny. If you had to choose which path you'd probably want the Bucs. But Mike, is it realistic, considering what we just saw, that the Panthers make the playoffs this year with 3 games to go in the 2025 season?
If the Dolphins hadn't been eliminated from playoff contention, I would say they'd have some real good insurance here. It's too even now, and I think the Bucs are a more talented team. Are they a more competent team? Who knows at this point? But I just think a lot of things are playing into the Buccaneers' favor. I mean, if you're telling me, here's the thing. Let's just put it down to the Bucs have won 9 of the last 10 games. A lot of their personnel is still the same. Still, same head coach for the most part. Like, different offensive coordinator from the last few years, okay? If you tell me, let me ask you this straight up. Do you have faith that the Panthers can beat the Seahawks?
No.
Do you have faith that the Bucs can beat the Dolphins?
Yes.
Do you think the Panthers can sweep the Buccaneers?
That's where I'm getting stumped.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's the process of elimination there is, like, if you think that the Bucs can beat the Dolphins and the Panthers' best outcome is splitting with the Buccaneers, you're saying to yourself, well, I think the Buccaneers are the favorite during this road to the playoffs. Now, the Panthers aren't very predictable, outside of the fact that of late they have won one, lost one, won one, lost one, won one, lost one, which sets them up for the same act special of, sweeping the Buccaneers, technically in that order, if they're following that trajectory. This weekend is going to teach us a lot about this team, right? If they beat the Buccaneers and then they can beat the Seahawks and hopefully the Dolphins can, then week 18 doesn't matter. The thing is, if the Bucs win this one and then the Panthers lose to the Seahawks, who, by the way, are trying to get the number 1 seed and, one up the Los Angeles Rams. Look, they have a lot to play for because the Seahawks are basically the second best team in the NFC. And if they lose out to the Rams in the division race, they have the 4th seed and they don't get a home game. So, like, there's a lot at stake for them down the stretch. Now, maybe that doesn't matter after this week if they lose and the Rams win. But, I mean, to me, this is one of those down to the wire sort of, conference championships.
Did you just make that conference championship joke because...
Or sorry, not conference, excuse me, division championships, because like the Rams are playing the Rams are playing the Cardinals in week 18. So like, and the Seahawks are playing the 49ers. So like the Seahawks have to pretty much win their next 2 weeks to have a shot here.
Yeah.
And so I think the Seahawks are going to view that game as meaningful. They're not going to be resting starters. They're going to be going hard. And obviously Sam Darnold's coming back. There's added motivation there, though I'm sure he'll say that week that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But Baker Mayfield has extra motivation coming in here next week. So I don't know. I think losing that Saints game was incredibly detrimental to their playoff run. That game could have been the ultimate insurance policy, because had they beaten beat the Saints, if they would have just beat the Bucs this week, they would have won the division. Had they beat the Saints and lost to the Bucs next week, they wouldn't need any help from the Dolphins or what have you to still win the division. Like, that's tough, man. That's tough. And I think if you're the Panthers, you're going to look at these two Saints games as the games that really spoiled your feel-good story.
Yeah. Oh, man. Could you just imagine, like, the New Orleans Saints, the 4-10 New Orleans Saints, and potentially the 2-12 New Orleans Saints, if the Panthers had their act together, are potentially keeping the Panthers from the playoffs. That's how it goes. Hey, that's how it goes.
Here's why it's damning, because the Saints beat the Bucs the week prior and basically wiped out the Panthers' first loss to the Saints. So they were given a mulligan and they still could not complete the mission. And I think that is what's going to be frustrating to a lot of people at the top of the organization, because it's all right there. Again, when something is in front of you, that carrot on the stick, and you've never reached the carrot, but it's getting closer and closer, and you're yearning to grab it, and then it gets yanked away, that's going to create, I mean, it's, you don't want to think emotionally, but fans are going to do that, right? Like, people, it's human nature. And so I think that's going to be, if they don't make the playoffs, especially if they like end on a really sour note, like let's say they beat the Bucs next week and then they lose the next two, or they lose to the Bucs and then the Bucs beat the Dolphins. Even if they beat the Seahawks, I could see that being a very frustrating closing out period to this team. And it's a shame because the vibes in the building are as good as they've been since I've been here. The talent is as good as it's been since we've been here. The quarterback seems to be maturing quite a bit. The offensive line seems to have an answer almost every other week when there's injuries every other week. Like, the defense is way more talent. Like, there's a lot to like about this team. And it's a shame because if they went 8-9 or 7-10 in a different way, I think that everybody would be lauded for the improvement that they did. But now, since they're so close to the division title and they had it in their hands, and right, they still control their destiny, I think the narrative, at least from a fan perspective, is going to be that of immediate disappointment. I think once everything cools down, you'll say to yourself, well, they improved by 3 wins the first year, 2 to 3 wins the second year. And they've always said that 2026 is going to be their thing. Privately and publicly, this team has wanted 2026 to be the time where they take that rocket ship and they don't come down for a while. And so I think that's where this team is. Like, they know that they want to be a contender next year, and they overachieved a bit this year. And if they end up looking like they were above their skis a little bit or ahead of their skis and they finish poorly, you hope that the messaging and the like literal outlook of this team's improvement doesn't get lost in the wash.
I think you're right. That it has shaded the season a little bit, but I also know, and I know I'm not very old, but I've been around long enough to know that, come training camp 2026, there's going to be a lot of hope, and no matter how the season ends, there's going to be a lot of explanations for how far this team has come in such a short time, because it was really dire in 2023. And 2 years later, they're fighting for a chance in the worst division of football, admittedly, but they're fighting for a playoff spot, and they're going to find a way to make that a hopeful thing. Let's talk about the Bucs and get out of here, because the Panthers play the Bucs in 2 of their last 3 games, and yes, the Bucs are reeling, but then once you go through their roster, you're like, yo, these guys are mad talented, kind of like what you're saying. Baker Mayfield has had a really good year so far, 2,999 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions for a passer rating of 90.6. He has taken 29 sacks on the year, which is, I believe, more than he has in his previous 2 years in Tampa Bay. So something to look out for there. They don't have a super prolific run game. No runner has notched over 500 rushing yards yet. I know Bucky Irving has been hurt for a lot of the season. He's back now. He adds an explosive element to this rushing offense, but still, that's a thing to consider. Mike Evans is back now. He is not going to reach the 1,000 receiving yards milestone that he has.
Yeah, we'll give him a break.
Yeah, let's give him a break because, like, dude has been doing it for so long and he, like, was hurt for most of the year. So it's pretty remarkable that he's, like, even back out there and making the impact that he is. Emeka Egbuka is probably he is their most prolific receiver on the team this year. He's a rookie, and he's actually been out receiving Teteroa McMillan.
Yeah, as it's
far this year. Yeah. Because T-Mac did not have a great game against the Saints. So I just look at just this offense, dude, and I'm just like, yo, how did these guys lose to the Saints? I look at this offense, and I'm just like, how did they lose to a Falcons team that got penalized 19 times? Because it just doesn't make sense. This is like a Pro Bowl offense. So I get that they're reeling. Mike, how do you think they match up with the Panthers? Because at first glance, I think that they match up really well with the Panthers, aka the Panthers had their work cut out for them.
Yeah, I think they match up as the more talented team. I think offensively, it's a very clear issue that Mike Jordan, the former Panthers guard, is starting for them at left guard. He's been terrible the last 2 weeks as far as just the eye test. Defensively, they've just given up a lot of yardage, and I think they're due for a bounce back. You think that they would reset after Mike Evans is screaming on his way to the locker room. I just don't think they've played very smart. I think that's the problem with this division in general, is none of these teams seem particularly intelligent in their approach to football sometimes. Like, the Falcons are like a Football Follies VHS every time I watch them. VHSs were before DVDs, by the way.
Yes, I understand. Thanks, Mike.
And you could order them you could order the Football Follies off the TV. It was a whole thing. But yeah, I just don't, I don't think any of these teams are going to win more than a playoff game. Baker's kind of fallen off over the last few weeks. He's probably handling the injury poorly. Although I do think this last game he played about as well as he has since dealing with some of his injury woes. Because it was his non-throwing shoulder, and obviously that messes with your mechanics and everything like that. But I thought he looked pretty good in that game, even though they lost. So, I mean, he did have the interception on that second to last scoring drive, which was brutal. But yeah, I mean, he's still Baker. He's still going to make big plays. He's still going to take chances. And if you can't get to him, as Scott and I said last week, he's going to make you pay. We did see the sacks show up against New Orleans. They had 5 sacks. You hope they can get similar pass rush production with Mike Jordan at left guard, especially from like the interior defensive linemen. But I still think the Bucs are more talented, and it's hard not to skew away from history because there are so many familiar faces in this matchup. And they really the Panthers just need to play sound. Like, they need to play them. They need to pretend there's a falcon on those helmets and try to make the most of this opportunity.
One quick thing I wanted to bring up. According to team rankings, the Tampa Bay Bucs are pretty good as a run defense.
Mm-hmm.
They only allow 101.4 rush yards a game. That's a top 10 stat in the league. On the passing side, though, this defense is pretty vulnerable.
Yeah, the secondary is not very good outside of Antoine Winfield.
It sounds like Bryce Young needs to lead the Panthers to 2 critical wins. And is it really that simple? Is it reducing it? Is it super reductive to say that if the Panthers make the playoffs, it's on Bryce Young's shoulders?
No, it's not. I think he's got to step up when his number's called.
Okay.
But I also think, and I'll say this, I think Dave Canales needs to allow him to step up when his number's called. Like, I thought the play calling in the second half after that first scoring drive against the Saints was pretty lame. Granted, we did see some mistakes before that 4th and 1. There was an audible and a change in protection, and it seemed like Chuba Hubbard didn't know what planet he was on. Dave Canales said that was not supposed to be a run with Bryce Young. Bryce kind of ran into Chuba. Like, there was so much confusion on that play. You can't have stuff like that. That cost you a couple of inches before you had to run for 4th and inches, right? And so I think they're just going to have to be sound. I think they've shown that when they execute, and they execute well and consistently, they can win. This offense is not super complicated. So when they do what they need to do, they can get up and they can score and they can throw the ball with anybody. But they got to execute, and that's going to be partially on Bryce Young. And the quarterback gets more credit than he ever deserves, and he's going to get more flack than he ever deserves. That's the job. And that's, obviously both sides of the argument. There are people that think that Bryce is just not good enough. There are people that think he's great. Probably more so in between. I think he is good enough. Whether that's good enough to get them to the promised land, that's a whole other conversation, and one we'll probably have in the offseason. But I think he's good enough to get them to the playoffs if they need him to be the wagon.
I got the Panthers. You know what? I just want this chaotic season to go on with consequential football. I got the Panthers winning 38-35 this week. In just an absolute shootout, because what the heck makes sense anymore? Mike, what do you got from a score?
Well, since you picked the Panthers, I know that I have to pick the Bucs. I'm going to say 24-20. I don't know. I just think losing that Saints game was so deflating, and you hope that they can kind of figure this whole thing out. But to me, it's just, I don't know. Taking emotion and just looking at this objectively, I think the on and off switch is going to be off for an extra week.
That is fair. All right. Great show. We'll see what happens. Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all of your Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
That's a wrap.